Today we're reviving the Sun JavaStation-2, aka the Krups or Tower model from the late 1990s. This is a network computer. It doesn't have a hard drive, and you can think of it as a very early thin client. It requires a network to boot into an operating system. It was meant to run JavaOS. We'll go through many trials and tribulations attempting to get that booting, many failures, cover some theory of operations, and finally resort to seeing if we can just get NetBSD to run on this thing. We'll figure out what's going on inside this Java station, fix up some broken plastic, and do plenty of network configuration and troubleshooting along the way. Let's get into it. This is a Sun Microsystems Java station. Coffee is going to be an ever-present theme with this thing, as you can tell from the Java logos there. It's got a particularly nice colored Java logo on the top, and you better believe it runs something called JavaOS, which sounds like that's going to be a total nightmare later in the video. This is the second Java station Sun made. I believe this one is called the JavaStation-NC, aka Krups, or the Tower, or the Percolator. The first version was called Mr. Coffee, or the Brick. And I would be remiss not to mention the quintessential Java Station video on YouTube by Cameron Gray, going on 7 years now. It is still a pleasure to watch. I've watched it many times, and that one goes over the Java Station 1. So what is this thing? You can kind of think of it like a thin client. In fact, Sun came out with the Sunrays a little later. We'll talk about those. And these are true proper thin clients in that they're basically just a frame buffer. You connect them up to a server. The server does everything. It runs the applications, and essentially you're just streaming all the content to this, and it can display it on an attached monitor. Network computer, as I understand it, pretty similar, except it actually runs the applications on device with the CPU that's in here. So same story, you need to hook it up to a server to get the Java OS over to it and the applications to run, but they run on here. So it's kind of like a precursor to a proper thin client, I guess. And in fact, I'm not even showing you the right one. This is very timely. I just received this package. Got it from the post office yesterday. Let me find the thing I want to show you in here. I've extracted what I was after, but there's a bunch of other good stuff in here that I'll put in other videos. This was sent to me by Y2KMan2K for the cost of shipping. Bunch of stuff in here, something very special I'm about to show you. And I believe his buddy Dave has something equally as cool in here for me, so look forward to that in future videos. Sneak peek, we've got about $300,000 worth of RAM in here, apparently. I really hope that joke doesn't make sense for anyone watching, not in 2026. Hopefully we're moving in a better direction with that. Look at this, a Sunray 1 in the original stand. I have no idea why they decided to build it this way, but basically these stands are never there when you buy them. I've got like, I don't know, 5 of these Sunrays. Finally have a stand. So huge thanks to Y2KMan2K. Getting sidetracked by Sunrays as one does, but I have a point. Definitely some similarities between these. Kind of just the shape of them, this kind of thing going on. I'm guessing some of the same designers were involved. But back to network computers. These were gonna take the world by storm in 1996. Network computers were actually put forward by Oracle, and they actually produced a specification called the Network Computer Reference Profile. Sun, IBM, Apple, Netscape were involved, and they made really cool graphics like this, apparently. I would say Sun was the biggest producer with these Java stations, but IBM had their hands in there. There was rumors of an Apple one that never materialized. And you'll notice in this list of companies, no Microsoft. This is me reading between the lines, so take this with a grain of salt. Microsoft was definitely in the thin client game over the years, but I suspect this was all the non-Intel, non-Microsoft guys trying to get a foothold and reduce the amount of PCs out there in the world. Or maybe they just wanted to make cool looking stuff, I don't know. A viewer named Falksy sent me this. They picked it up for 15 bucks, saved it from e-waste over in California, so I paid them that plus shipping, and that's a pretty screaming deal on one of these things, so huge thanks to them. I hope I'm saying that name right. We're going to power this thing on and figure out how it works, but first we'll take a look around it physically, and you may have noticed I'm only showing you one side of it so far. Speaking of shipping, I have bad news. Pretty sure this happened during shipping, despite being packaged well. And I've tried to like push this plastic back so it's not protruding like that, and this plastic is super brittle. Like when I'm holding it and messing with it, it feels like it's just going to explode into a million pieces. So Hopefully it doesn't get any worse throughout the course of this video. Used to belong to the New Haven Unified School District, apparently. Got a little more damage right here, big crack. Amazingly, there was just one part rolling around, one little piece of plastic that broke off. So if I ever really have to glue it all back together, I do have everything. The unfortunate part is this. This little door broke off. The way this is supposed to work is these doors kind of corral your cables, I think. And then you can kind of lean them over. This one, of course, just comes off. This one is still more or less working, which is good. So the plastic where I was showing you that big crack, everything is kind of off kilter. So you can see these are little clips that hold the two plastic halves together. It's kind of busting out. We got some really bad, oh yeah, that thing just comes off. This is a misaligned power button. Seems like it's working though. It's kind of all I care about. I'm going to leave this off so I don't make anything worse. I do have the power brick, but you have to ask yourself, was it worth it? This thing weighs about as much as this does, and its plastic is not quite as brittle, and so you got this dense unit despite the amount of packaging you have, and it's banging around in the box as it travels and beats up the thing that it's with. But that's okay. I think it is worth it because, of course, it's some bizarre pinout. Maybe this is some sort of standard. I don't really know, but I really hope this thing works. Looks like it's just 5 volts at 5 amps and 12 volts at 400 milliamps. Cool. Continuing our tour, as you've seen, except for the back, there's really not a lot going on aside from some very nice logos. There is an indicator light right here. You saw the power button right there. And along the back, we've got some audio jacks. We've got a mouse and keyboard. I believe that's PS2. Got a serial port. This is how we're going to first try to interact with this thing. And probably a 10 megabit Ethernet jack, I'm guessing. There's the power input and VGA out. So here's the initial plan. We're going to start hooked up to the monitor. I've got the VGA monitor, mouse and keyboard, and we'll power it on. There's a good chance we'll get nothing because I believe this thing has a battery-backed NVRAM and the battery is almost certainly dead, at which point, if we get nothing, at which point we will switch over to the serial port and we'll go through reconfiguring the NVRAM, which will allow this thing to boot, and then that'll be our next hurdle. It's also my understanding that this has some internal flash storage for a version of JavaOS. The basic interaction is this thing wants to reach out to a server, get an IP address, and be told, okay, what server should I start talking to now that I have an IP address? That server is going to be giving this thing back information about, here's a JavaOS for you, here's where you can go get it on some NFS mount. So that's going to be like a whole song and dance. In the perfect world, I'm hoping there's already an OS on here, and then this thing will boot to it without network. I don't even know if that's true. Anyway, let's first, it's not, power supply's not in there. Let's just plug in the power supply and see if it blows up. I got a green light. That's good. Don't hear any weird noises. And then we're going to plug this guy in. I think it goes like this. I don't actually know. One second. Other way. Goes the other way. It has power. Green light's still on. Okay. Now I'm going to press the power button. Oh, keyboard lights came on. I see a light here. Nothing on the screen though. I think that's really good progress so far actually. It's more than I was hoping for. The green light is on. But as you can see, nothing on the screen. I'll let it sit here for a moment. I think we're going to need to get to that serial port to reconfigure this thing. It's not really a, I guess you could call it a BIOS. It's kind of like Sun servers, I'll show you. I was reading that it can take over a minute for anything to come over the serial console port. I can't remember if that was also in Cameron Gray's video. I should probably go, I think he had to do this whole song and dance. I haven't watched the video in a couple months. I should probably go rewatch that. Anyway, this isn't looking like any VGA is going to come out for us. So let's get set up for serial. Not having a lot of luck so far, but let me show you where I'm at. So, hooked it up to the serial console. Everything I read says 9600 baud. It's on right now. Side note, I won't be able to show it to you or let you listen because it's so faint. It really sounds like there's a fan in there. Really, really quiet fan. So, I'm on the serial console. One of the only things I can get it to do is when I power it off like this, I get this character on the terminal. That's one sign of life. And then there's supposed to be some debug keystrokes you can enter. So if I do Control-Alt, D. This should run some diagnostics when it starts up. If I press it and power it on now, oh well, now it's not happening. One time it showed the number 8. I've tried a bunch of different baud rates and even a real terminal, and no luck. But I was looking through some interesting documentation, 26 years old, and it says you might not be able to get an OK prompt on this JavaStation-NC I've got. All the other guides were with the JavaStation-1. There's a jumper inside, J1300, and I can jump pins 7 and 8 to force an OpenBoot PROM OK prompt over the serial port. Which unfortunately means I think I'm going to have to try to figure out how to get inside this thing. And don't judge me if it happens, but I'm almost certain this crack is going to continue its trajectory, and then this thing is going to be in 2 pieces. And maybe we'll have to glue it back together. So I'm going to look around. There's no screws to speak of, just these clips. I think I'll start there and let you know what I find. Okay, so far it's not bad, not too much plastic broken. I released this second clip, this one was already loose, and this thing is coming off. And I also learned, remember that crack up here? The only thing holding this on was that peg that it sits in. That's kind of funny. Yeah, I almost don't even want to show you this, but there is a fan in there. Oh, there it is. It happened. Well, now that we're apart, we can glue that all back together. That's not a fan. That is a speaker sitting above a chip, making it look like it's a fan. Also, why don't I have any RAM? It says this white connector here is my flash SIM. So I think that's where I was hoping that the OS would be stored. Don't have that. And then we've got some SIM slots here. I'm going to go check if there's onboard RAM, and these are just purely for expansion. Kind of interesting. The documentation says these are DIMM slots, but this thing says they're SIM slots. What's up with that? Also, I can't figure out a reasonable way to get this other piece off. It did not come cleanly off like the other side, which is why, as predicted, I made everything worse. This is good though. So now, it's not as bad as it seems. Don't worry, guys. Now I'll actually be able to glue that back together flush when we put this back together. And yeah, no one will ever know. I need to go find a 32 megabyte stick. I really don't know if I have one in this form factor. You can see in there it's going to need to have 2 notches in the stick. Yikes. I'll go look around. This is almost certainly why this thing doesn't work, right? Can't work without RAM. Let's get this battery out of here and see what its story is. Did someone pilfer my Java station? That's got to be dead too. 100 millivolts. Yeah. I don't know if I have one of these either. Should have done my research. Well, I'm doing what I always do in this situation. And I'm taking apart this poor PIX firewall. So I'm pretty sure it has the RAM we need. How do we get in here? I don't remember how this works. Come on! I don't recall this being hard to do. It would have the right RAM we need if I hadn't have already stolen it. Yeah, okay, so the next question is, what did I put the RAM that was in here in? I did find this stick, but I think it's 256 megabytes. It's way too much. This thing can only take like 2 32 megabyte sticks. It is the right size though. I bet it's down there in my Windows 95 machine. The question will be, can I get it out without having to take my 30 networking cards I've got in there out of it? It was in there. I think this is 32 megs. I'll probably just put this one in there. 256 kind of excessive for Windows 95, but at least I'll know where it is. I'm looking into the battery situation, and you're not going to believe this. I have the right one. It's a CR1632 3-volt battery. Why do I have this? Got the RAM in, brand new battery. So far so good. There are those jumpers I think the documentation was talking about. There's another one right here. What's that one labeled? That one's labeled like J1202 or JL202. It's not that one. And then this one is, let me get my face in there 1 second. Yeah, it's this one. So this is JL300, I think. And if we bridge pins 7 and 8, I'll have to figure out where. It claims we can get into essentially the BIOS of this thing. But before we do that, let's hook this thing back up as is to a monitor, a serial port, now that we've got some RAM. The battery problem is still going to be a problem. We're going to have to get in there and configure and remind this thing of its MAC address, maybe some other stuff. But I just want to see if we get different behavior with RAM, basically. Okay, got all the peripherals hooked back up, serial port included. I'm going to give it power. It didn't turn on by itself when I did this last time. It did this time though. Nothing on the VGA yet. Nothing on the serial port. No change in behavior. Did I seat that RAM properly? Helps when you actually put the RAM in, though I have a sneaking suspicion it was making good enough contact. Okay, it's back on now. We got an M on the serial port. Does that kind of feel like the wrong baud rate or something? I do like seeing something. That sound I thought was a fan is actually this speaker making a faint hiss. Probably not good. It is possible that the RAM needs to be in this one. I think they're independent banks or whatever. I don't think it matters, but I guess really quick before I get too far, I will switch them. Though the diagram says to put it in the one I did put it in. It's also possible this isn't the right RAM. This is interesting. Just for fun, I put the RAM in the other slot. It's powered on again, or has power I should say, but when I gave it power it didn't automatically turn on like it was with the RAM over here. So it's behaving like it did initially, which is weird. We want the jumper on pins 7 and 8. This is pin 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. So we need it on these back ones. And they were nice enough to make this speaker assembly like almost touching the pins, so that's good. And you would think a cool guy like me would have a bunch of jumpers sitting around, but apparently not. I can only find a bunch of dumb stuff like this for motherboards. So continuing our time-honored tradition of stealing from PIX firewalls, this is an ISA flash memory card. You can like boot off of it, kind of like a hard drive. And it's got a version of iOS on it, or PixOS, or whatever they called it. It's from another PIX firewall. I'm glad I'm filming this because I'm going to steal this jumper, and now I know that I need to put one back there. The jumper is on, and it's going to be very annoying to get off because it's under this speaker shroud thing. Not really holding my breath on this. I'm starting to think something else is wrong, but it has power. And let's turn it on. Swapping the RAM did nothing, by the way. It says I can issue Control-Alt breaks on a PS2 keyboard. That didn't work. Nothing new coming over the serial port. I've tried issuing a break there as well. Doesn't do anything. Well, I didn't do a very good check for this RAM. So I'm going to double check that this RAM is even compatible. That could be the only problem. If it is the right RAM, then I'm starting to think something serious is going on. I'm going to let it sit here for a long time. I've definitely waited more than a minute or whatever on the serial console, but you never know, I guess. This chip kind of heats up a little bit. I guess I could do a chip check, couldn't I? That one's a little warm. Also a little warm. I checked for caps and leakage and stuff. Didn't really see anything on the big guys or these surface mount jobs, but that's not warm. I don't know. I'll be back. The light doesn't come on with that jumper set. I can tell it's powered though because the speaker makes noise. Alright, so I was reading one of the manuals and it says it wants 3.3 volts unbuffered EDO DIMMs, not SD-RAM. This is SD-RAM. So this definitely won't work in this thing. I made a mental note to check that before I got all excited and threw it in, and then forgot, obviously. I don't think it's going to hurt anything. I ordered one on eBay, but it might not be here for like upwards of a week. So I'm going to go look around for more RAM sticks. Wouldn't it be funny if the PIX firewall over here, just PIX firewalls, the gifts that keep on giving. These are also SD-RAM, which is no surprise because the one we stole from the smaller PIX is also SD-RAM. Okay, last attempt, I promise, until I shelve this video and wait for the eBay stick to arrive. This is an IBM RS6000, 43P-140, and it has almost the same type of RAM. Pizza the Hut in the serial port Discord pointing me in this direction. Let me show you the stick. It's a 168 pin EDO DIMM, but two big problems. It's 64 megabytes. Oh, hi Chloe. 64 megabytes, and the slots in the JavaStation are a max of 32. There is a chance that the JavaStation will just use the first 32 megabytes, but I'm kind of doubting that. And another problem is this is server RAM. This is ECC, error code correcting RAM, so it's got an extra chip, parity chip on there. It's also possible that the JavaStation will ignore that. and it's 3.3 volts. It's not going to hurt anything to try it. I'm not expecting much. What do you think, Chloe? Is it going to work? Are you generating a bunch of static electricity for me so I ruin everything? She says, go for it. You already broke the damn thing in half anyway. The adventure's over. Anyone that was worried about this causing a problem can breathe easily. This stick is like a slightly different size or something. It looks like it's the right size, but I can't get it to seat fully. It is. Look at that. So I've lined the notches up, and the edge of the stick is different. Maybe they did that because it's ECC or something, to keep jokesters like me from ruining a already probably broken Java Station. Alright, Java Station is to the side for now, and I don't want to wait a week to film a video, so this is kind of an interesting experience for you. You're in the future. I'm going to start filming a video about Token Ring with this Cisco gear I just picked up. You'll probably see that first, but I'll be back here on the Java Station in a week. See you then. 5 days later, the RAM stick has arrived. This is sort of our only hope. If this doesn't work, I guess a recap would be in order. And then some much more... That sounds worse than it is. It's just this metal making noise. I also realized this chip's missing. Don't know if that's normal. Hopefully that's not important. Hopefully they just program it with that or something. And I think I'm also going to take out that jumper we put in and get it back to normal behavior. Yeah, it's gonna be hard to do. 1 second. Gotta get the speaker out of the way. Come on. There we go. Gonna put that back where I found it. I also don't know if I mentioned this flash SIM here was an optional upgrade. So theoretically this thing should work without it. It just doesn't have the ability to persist a JavaOS to there. We will for sure have to deliver it over the network every time, basically. So every time you power this up, you'll have to have your network set up to deliver the OS. I really hope that's a problem I get to solve if this works. I'm going to get this thing hooked back up. I'll be right back. I think we're ready. I'm going to flip the power on. Don't expect this thing to do anything. And we'll turn our monitor on here. And that's ready. Let's see if I can show you. So I am going to hit the power button and see if we get anything at all. Oh, there's hope. Look at that. Yes. Yes. Now, okay, this is great. This is some actual progress 20 minutes in. What's it going to do, though? I read a lot about this animated coffee cup thing. If you're running a version of the firmware that shows you that, as it boots up, it's going to eventually, you'll see, hopefully a coffee cup shows up. I was reading that means we can press some key combinations to get into like debugging menus and stuff. That's exciting. I'm going to let it sit here for a while. About 10 seconds later, it is not a coffee cup yet, but it's a question mark, and I think that is complaining about network. It's not on a network. Let's fire up the retro rack and see if this thing will actually reach out and attempt to get an IP address. Yeah, okay, progress. Okay, the retro rack is online, and I'm pretty sure the switch this is going into can handle 10 megabit. I'm pretty sure this is only 10 megabit. So I'm curious if we just plug it in, is it actually going to attempt to do anything? I'm going to go read the docs a little bit. There might be some keyboard inputs I can give it to make it restart. What's Control-Delete do? Of course, nothing. It's Sun. I'm just going to reboot it off, back on. There wasn't anything ever coming over the serial console, by the way. I'm pretty sure it will be able to get an IP, assuming it's working properly. It's also possible... Yeah, that's not good. That came up way faster than last time. There's a pretty good chance that it's lost its MAC address, and all the instructions about getting in over the serial port and stuff are for the older brick model. And yeah, it seems like it's going to be tricky to do that with this. Let me go look at those key combos real quick. The documentation is very proud of this Java coffee cup progress indicator, and we are at this stage. That is apparently the saucer of the coffee cup, and it's trying to initialize everything, and I believe it is attempting to then go out on the network, and it's failing at the Ethernet step. So supposedly we can hold Alt B within 4 seconds of startup. So I'm just going to press it, immediately hold Alt B, and it should give us some network diagnostics, maybe. Yeah, that's different. Okay, look at this. It has a MAC address. That is good. And it says we're timing out, trying to get an IP. So we've got a network issue. I suspect this thing is working just fine. Fantastic. Sees it's 32 megabytes. It's got a MicroSpark-2 EP RISC processor in there. Oh, and it's just trying over and over again. This is really nice that they added this debug UI. Okay, so I've just got a network problem. We can figure that out. Right, buddy? Go fix it. Says, discarding unwanted DHCP offer. I don't think it likes my retro rack. Whoa, what's going on here? Cool. This is bad, though. She's getting curious about that. She might be getting ejected. Sorry, dude. Now this is really interesting. I turned on some DHCP logging on my DHCP server. This is a Cisco VXR router that's in the retro rack, and it's getting requests from the Java station. This is the MAC address of the Java station, and it's trying to give back DHCP offers. It's essentially saying, yeah, you can have IP 10.0.0.102. And as you can see over on the Java station, it's saying, discarding unwanted DHCP offer. So I was kind of afraid something like this was going to happen. What we're going to do is set up like a totally local network, and we'll get a Linux box out, and we'll set up a DHCP server, and we'll have it specifically look for maybe this MAC address and give it an IP. I think it's just picky about how it wants to be fed information. I'm reading through the documentation on how the Java station starts up, what it expects from the DHCP server. And it's kind of funny, all of these docs are still hosted on Oracle's website. Oracle, of course, bought Sun, and Oracle was the company that started this whole network computer thing in the first place, so there's something poetic in that, I think. But I'm reading the step about the Java station receiving the DHCP offer, and it says it looks to see whether it contains the options required to boot the Java station. So DHCP communication can contain like key value pairs, and in our case, the Java station requires quite a bit for it to even listen to the DHCP offer, and that is in this section. It wants quite a few things. So this boot serve A, I think Cisco calls that next server. Anyway, it's the IP address of the server that's going to host the OS. That's reasonable. It wants a lease time for the IP address lease, a subnet, and it needs a DNS server and the DNS domain, and then the path on the server, which is the NFS exported directory containing the JavaOS image. So to get this thing working, we need a DHCP server. I've got that. I'm going to attempt to use the Cisco. If we can't get there, we'll do it totally isolated on a single machine. And then I'm going to try to get the Cisco to hand off to an actual Sunfire machine. And that thing's going to host a DNS server and export the JavaOS over NFS. That's the thinking. So what I'm going to go do on the Cisco machine, and I'll show you when I'm done, I'm going to try to set all these, even though the server isn't up and running yet. We'll get into that. And just see if it gets a little further in its process. This is the DHCP configuration on the router, and I've given it an IP lease, a DNS server. This is a Sunfire V440, which is not on yet, but I would really like to see the Java station try to talk to it. And then a fake domain name, next server. So this informs the Java station, hopefully, go talk to this thing for the JavaOS, and then we've got this boot file option, which is where on the server that thing lives. So that should be live, and we can do a show run. And yeah, here is my existing retro rack DHCP pool. It's going to try to hand out an IP and hopefully tell the Java station all this stuff. Let's see what happens. I'm going to turn it on with that Alt B again so we can really see what it's up to. It's booting up now, and the Alt B key code worked apparently. It's asking for an address right away. Thing's pretty quick. Come on. Timeout. It's going to try again. Oh, this is going to be such a nightmare to get working. Timeout again. That might be fine. Oh, look at that. Received ACK. Those are the settings I gave it. It's announcing its IP address. It's happy about that. It got 10.0.0.104 this time. Now it's trying to reach out to the server. Yes. So yeah, you can see I gave it apparently just enough to make it happy to proceed. And this isn't going to work because that server's down. Or, well, I should say it's off. Okay, we did it. I'm going to go write my config. I'll show you the server we're going to use. You also might notice it's trying to read a file called sunw.js2ep from TFTP. So you can configure these things to try to get some configuration from TFTP, and I think they still use NFS at the end of the day to get the OS bin. So we might have to set up a TFTP server as well, is what I'm saying. These debug logs are pretty funny. It's telling me the addresses it's using: my Mac, my IP, his Mac, his IP. That's a little presumptuous to assume that my V440 is a man. Speaking of the V440, here she is. I think it's a girl. Anyway, the Sun V240 is hosting the Sunray software. So this guy's not doing a whole lot of anything. We're going to try to configure a DNS server and get an NFS share going on this V440. So let's power it up. Start up the jet engine here. Here's the serial console of that V440. We're going to tell it to boot. I think it's got Solaris 8 or something on it, maybe? I'm not sure. I can't really remember. Let this thing boot up. Solaris 10. Sun OS 5.10. Wow, fancy. Do I know my password? I do. Okay. What I'm going to go do is read a bunch of documentation on why this thing wants a DNS server. Then I'm going to go learn how to set up a DNS server on Solaris. I'm really bad at using Solaris. Then I'll get an NFS mount. Then I'll go find a copy of JavaOS, which I don't have yet. I saw some links floating around. I'll bring you back, show you what I did, and then we'll try to boot it, see what happens. Actually, before we do all that, let's boot it up with that server online. And so this thing will be able to attempt to talk to it and see if it gets any further. It's complaining. So it's going to, it times out the first few times, and then like you saw on camera earlier, I've only done that once. So I'm hoping it happens again. It eventually figures out the DHCP stuff. I'm digging this, like, two typefaces layered on top of each other. We got to bring this energy back. Bring this back to tech. Yeah, it's getting further. It went off and talked to the server. Now it's trying to go over TFTP to do something. I think I can configure it to not do this TFTP stuff, maybe in one of the DHCP options. Yeah, it's definitely trying to do more stuff. This is good. I think this thing's healthy. It's just going to be a matter of figuring out all the software headaches. I will go do that now. I'm back. I haven't gotten very far, but at this point in my journey, I've decided I do not need a domain name server, actually. So if you were really using this thing, like in the real world, and you needed to resolve domains, you know, you're surfing the web on it or something, you would want a real DNS server. That's why it needs that. I don't think I'm going to need that for, you know, just kicking the tires or whatever. So then I went down the rabbit hole of I want it to stop trying to boot over TFTP. These docs even say that's going to be super slow, it's deprecated, and it also literally looks more complicated. So you use something called a vendor-specific option. That is DHCP option 43, and I can give it a list of key value pairs, I believe. The one I care about is this JSB proto, the boot protocol. And so down here it says the possible settings for that are TFTP and NFS, and it is defaulting to TFTP because I don't have this set. So basically, I need to set this JSB proto in DHCP option 43 to NFS. And it looks like I have to convert that value to hex first and give it to iOS. Anyway, I'll show you what I end up with. So I have set vendor specific option 43 to a hex value. And this thing is saying, what was that thing called? Right, it's setting this JSB proto value to NFS. That's what this is in hex. So now what we should see when we boot it back up is it should not do any TFTP stuff, and it should try to talk over NFS and get JavaOS that way. And I think that's going to be way easier and faster. I should also say I'm doing this in a way you wouldn't have done this in production. So everything that tries to talk to my DHCP server is getting all these options. But when these things reach out, they actually have this client class identifier, and they identify themselves. So in my case, I have the tower model. It's going to say I'm a sunw.js2ep. And in a more sophisticated DHCP server, maybe you can do this on iOS, I don't know. But if I was running this on the Sun machine, for example, I would key off of this and only give these values back to someone coming in and asking and saying, hey, I'm this thing. Then that way you don't have random machines coming online and getting your vendor-specific protocol stuff that they don't care about. I am enjoying how fast this thing boots, even if it has to retry the DHCP settings a couple times. I wonder if that's normal, or maybe my setup's weird, I'm not sure. Don't like that. So see that it did decode the vendor options. It says JSB proto equals NFS. And then it's still trying to do some TFTP crap. So maybe I did that wrong. I like that I was able to serve it, and it's saying, hey, this is what I see. So that maybe there's hope. Okay, I'm going to go find a copy of JavaOS, get it on an NFS mount at export JavaOS, and I'll be back. Also, when I'm doing this to the screen, don't worry about it. It doesn't hurt anything, I promise. We're making progress. Right, Chloe? I don't usually like Chloe in here, but she's been so well behaved. Anyway, I hope you like cats. Probably going to see her a lot. She's been like in every video lately. Anyway, made some progress. I have a copy of JavaOS. Huge thanks to CDI, Pizza the Hut, Lego Dude, Juniper, the regular suspects in the Serial Port Discord, which you get access to if you subscribe to my Patreon. Anyway, JavaOS, there was like a really early release version. I'm not entirely sure which version this is. And it's archived. You can find it. And archive.org was having problems as I'm filming this video. And so those guys came through, and I've got a copy. And now the problem is, like, how do I get it on that v440? So I've got this FTP server that's on the network. We're going to try to FTP it over to the v440 here. Got to go look up. I'm assuming Solaris comes with a built-in FTP client. I have to assume. We're going to FTP to that server I was just showing you. I think it lets me do anonymous. Uh-oh. Let me go. No, maybe it's fine. LS. Oh, okay. I gotta go look up the user password of my own FTP server. We're good to go. I had set up anonymous access because it's in my own network, of course. And it's already using binary. That is good. Let's do an LS. We want JavaOS. So we say get JavaOS. Got it. And you say bye. And it says goodbye back. So is it here? It is. We have transferred a file to the v440. I'm going to go set up an NFS share. I'm not going to show you that because that's all over the internet. And then we'll read some more documentation, I think. Okay, so I've got a share at export JavaOS, read write. And then if we take a look at what's in there, oops, we have JavaOS. What I'm a little confused about is that the thing is still trying to TFTP, maybe because it tried this and it didn't work. I also haven't quite gleaned from the documentation how to tell it like the name of this bin. So I don't know if it like, this is the OS that it needs to download and start running. So I don't know if it defaults to the only thing in this folder. So let's boot it up. I suspect we're going to get the same behavior as before, and then I'm going to have to tweak some settings, truly figure out how to get it to stop doing the TFTP thing, and probably point it at this. The NFS section of the documentation is pretty sparse. So we're not doing this TFTP thing, which uses what's called a Booterfile. So we're not doing that. So we want to set JSB proto to NFS, which we have done, and that had no obvious effect on the thing. But it also says we want to set the DHCP options for root path and bootserv A to the directory on the NFS server where the OS image is located. Still don't see anything about what the name of the image is. It might, I'll dig through this documentation, it might be making an assumption about what it is. We'll see. And that next server thing is obviously not the folder. So I think what we want to do is set next server to this. don't even know if it's going to let us do that. Let's see what it does now. I suspect it won't work. Then we'll try again. I also messed around. So remember I was setting that option to NFS. I changed it slightly, and this is that option with NFS in quotes. I'll show you on the machine. I don't think it matters, but we'll see. Yeah, it is still trying to reach over TFTP. Here you can see I put the quotes around NFS, and that didn't work. So I think what we need to do are those DHCP options where root path is this thing, and I think next server also needs to be this thing. I'm going to mess around. No difference. I feel like we're so close. Chloe has not been particularly helpful with the TFTP issues. We might be getting somewhere. Oh, we're so close. There were some settings in the documentation. I gave up, by the way. I'm pointing it at a TFTP server. But it wants this booter file. And I cannot find any documentation about what that should look like. But it also said I could give it a root path, and then, oh, my option didn't set. There was a DHCP option to tell it the name of the OS bin. And so there's a couple ways to get it over TFTP. There's booter file, and then it goes to NFS. Can't find any documentation about what's supposed to be in there. But theoretically, I should have been able to tell it an exact OS bin. Okay, locking onto TFTP server. Maybe I haven't made any progress. There's been a development. Let me show you. I can make the thing reboot itself. I'll explain in a second. I could not, for the life of me, figure out how to install the TFTP server or enable it on Solaris 10. It seems comical. It should have been so easy. So I'm using my TFTP server in the retro rack, and I literally renamed the JavaOS bin to this thing, right? And it's trying to read it, and it eventually gives up and restarts itself. So, doesn't like that. There's theoretically a way to get the TFTP server to deliver just the JavaOS without this Booterfile stuff. I cannot find what that Booterfile is supposed to look like. Check this out. You can run Linux on these things and NetBSD, but I mean, you can run Linux on anything, so I'd rather not do that. This is the very first little piece. So I put it's called a PROLL file, a PROL file. I put that in there and renamed it to what this thing keeps pointing at. And yeah, look at that. It's trying to do something. This thing is like a little bootloader. It's supposed to have like a Linux kernel somewhere else, so it's getting all confused. So it's dropping type 26, no funk. Netif RX, yeah, it's trying to TFTP something else. I'd rather not do that. I'd really like to see JavaOS on this thing, but I'm having no luck. This is cool though. Some sort of different behavior. It's many hours later, and I'm no closer to getting JavaOS running on this thing, but I have gotten some life out of the serial console. You want to know how you do that? Oh my god, I broke another piece of anyway, we have a lot of plastic repair to do. Anyway, you unplug the mouse and keyboard, and then you power it on. And it gives you this, keyboard not present, using TTYA, I think it said, the serial port, for input-output. So, with no mouse and keyboard, we get something over the serial console. We know the memory amount, we know it's a Java station, its MAC address, but you can't get into the OK prompt. So remember, on the Sunfire V440, I was in this thing called the OK prompt, and I was able to boot the machine. This thing has the same deal. And I have issued break commands and stuff, nothing. So I remember reading the documentation when we were dealing with that jumper. You can't get into the OK prompt without that jumper set correctly. This is what it does. I think it's just doing it over and over again. This is what it does when there's no mouse and keyboard. I am so pissed that I just broke this tab off. This is like a critical piece of the case. Oh. So now I'm going to get the keyboard back in there. Maybe we can break off, the rest of the plastic. I'm going to power it back up, and I'm immediately going to issue a Control-Alt break on the keyboard. So I just did that. Keyboard not present. I think I plugged it into the mouse port. Let's try that again. Break more plastic. How about that? All right, back on, and an immediate Control-Alt break. And we get this menu. This thing is telling us our various key codes we can enter. And what I've been using is Alt-B to get into the debug net booting. So remember this screen. I'm going to power it off again. So you'll remember our little header here. And in the documentation I found, it said, put a jumper on pins 7 and 8. As far as I can tell on the screen, you know, the printing on the PCB, this is pin 1. But 7 and 8 do nothing. The trick is to put them on these, which maybe are 7 and 8, or the documentation's wrong. Hopefully this helps someone in the future. So put them on that one. So now if we boot it up and give it a Control-Alt break right away, we get a new option. Now we can issue an Alt-F to enter forth on TTYA, that's just the serial port, before probing. Forth is a programming language that the OK prompt essentially is written in. The open boot, whatever, you'll see it. I'll show you. And it's complaining about network link, so it's still trying to do something. I think the retro rack is off right now, so it's going to fail to get on the network, so it's out there trying. But we're going to restart it with Alt-F this time. So I'm going to power it off, power it on, Alt-F. We got Chloe here helping us out. Maybe she'll be good luck this time, I don't know. And now the screen is blank. However, on the serial console, hi Chloe, with that jumper installed properly, we get a bunch more information as it's doing stuff, and we get an OK prompt. So we basically have, I guess you could say, root access to this thing. You can do, let's do show devs. You can see that it's got a network interface. Yeah, so I'm pretty sure I should be able to configure it fully from here. I've spent hours trying and I haven't figured it out. Remember when I told the V440 to boot? I can tell this thing to boot over the network, and I can set a bunch of variables. So we can say print emb, and we can see it's got an empty boot file. Kind of surprised that the boot device is something called flash token ring net. That's kind of weird. But yeah, we can get maybe a little further now. I've had no luck yet. I'll be back after some more trial and error and research. Editor's note here. You'll notice throughout the rest of the video, I don't really bring up this OK prompt again. It didn't prove to be useful. The device is in like read-only mode or something. So I'm looking at all these variables here. Whenever I tried to set a variable, it just wouldn't. So when I tried to set the boot file, basically set any of this stuff, it just wouldn't set it. And I couldn't figure out what was going on. I'm curious to know if I needed to issue some special command to be able to interact with this. I've never had that problem on any other Sun machine. But the thought was that I'd be able to set everything manually because at the end of the day, I think the thing is just getting all the stuff it needs from DHCP, and I thought I was going to be able to do it here, so I'm so excited. And that just didn't end up being the case. Thought I'd let you know. Okay, let me tell you what's going on. The retro rack is up. This might be a 2-hour video. Next server is 10.00.106. If you've got an eagle eye, you'll notice this keeps changing because as I boot the retro rack back up, my TFTP VM is getting a different IP address every time. Anyway, it's 10.00.106. It's called worker 3. I'll show you that. And this one, root path, is /JavaStation. This is the contents of the TFTP server at 10.00.106. It's got a folder called JavaStation and JavaOS is in there. And then I also have this Sun JS2 EP. This is a file that the JavaStation keeps trying to reach out for. In the tarball where I found the JavaOS, I found this inetboot.jd. I have copied that to this. So this is this inetboot.jd file. I think it's a valid booter file. As you'll see, maybe not. I've also got a bunch of other crap in my TFTP server, mostly Cisco related. I'm really sorry about this video. It's probably not making a lot of sense. Anyway, the JavaStation is trying to find this file, and it's coming to this server to get it. That part works. We are going to do a TCP dump to find all the TFTP traffic coming into this VM. We'll set that up. TFTP uses port 69. Nice. So this is sitting here, and if anyone tries to talk to this guy over TFTP, we're going to see it. Gonna boot the Java Station back up. I'm gonna issue an Alt-B so we can get that network debugging logs. This screen we're all getting painfully familiar with. Reaching out to find its booter file, and on the console on the TFTP server, we can see someone has reached out, the Java Station, for sunw.js2ep, and then we get out of memory. I am no longer confused as to why these things were not a going concern at all, and totally failed. What is going on here? Probably I'm doing something wrong, or my booter file is wrong, but I bought another stick of memory, even though it should not be necessary. So we gotta wait for that to come from eBay. We're so close, but so far. I feel like I'm just doing something wrong. All the documentation really assumes you're just like entrenched in the Sun ecosystem, which I'm not. I don't know anything about this crap. I still feel like we're so close. Let me tell you about the last 3 days of my life. This is a third booter file. It's trying to boot NetBSD. You can see that here. This is the furthest I've made it. So obviously it reaches out over TFTP to worker 3, gets this file, starts executing it, then it tries to boot P. That doesn't work. Then it tries to do something called boot params. I got that kind of working. You can see it gets an IP address back again, but then it's complaining that an RPC call from boot params is not working, and it ultimately fails. I think I need to explain all these different booter files and what exactly this thing's trying to do over the network so that we can troubleshoot together and might make a little more sense. On an archived version of a JavaStation page on Sun's website from 1997, there are various Solaris packages you can install to facilitate this server stuff, but they want to run on very old versions of Solaris, Sun OS 2.5 or something. There's also a package called sunwjdsc.tar. Deep inside that package, again, this is meant to be installed, in the export root Java desktop, we have a copy of JavaOS. I believe this is the OS binary we want to install, and it's 5 megabytes. Also in that package, under a TFTP boot folder, there is inetboot.jd. I believe this is a booter file. That's the one that gives us out of memory when the Java Station tries to run it. I believe it's not actually out of memory. I just think this Java Station can't run this particular booter file. Then I tried another booter file, the prol file. That's the one that's trying to load Linux. This one also doesn't get very far, but at least it can run on the Java Station. It's archived in various websites about how to run Linux on the Java Station, and its file name is prol.krups.id18. Throughout this whole adventure, I've been taking a look at this website where someone got their Java Station Mr. Coffee, the older version that I don't have, running NetBSD. That is the booter file I'm running right here. It is called bootjs.net and is still hosted by the NetBSD project. Theoretically, the Java Station should be able to make a DHCP broadcast, and if someone responds with the right information, it will proceed from there. In our initial trials, that was my 7200 VXR router. I had configured it to come back with the minimum requirements, which are basically next server. Now remember, I used those vendor-specific options, which should have forced this thing to try to just grab an OS over NFS. I've never seen that happen. The way it behaves, at least initially with every single booter file, is it looks at this next server, and then it goes off to it, and it tries to grab a booter file named sunw.js2ep. Now, in the DHCP offer, I can specify this file name. It does respect that, but it doesn't really help me. I still need a valid booter file. This is always what happens. DHCP out, learns its IP. I'm simplifying this response here. It learns its IP, its host name, and a next server, and then it goes off over TFTP to get a booter file called this. This is my current setup. I took the 7200 VXR completely out of the equation. In fact, it's off. Worker 3, the TFTP VM, is doing everything. It's doing DHCP, it's doing reverse ARP. Show you all that. The Java Station makes a request. Worker 3 says, your next server is me, 10.0.0.104. Your IP is 10.0.0.99, and your host name is tower. These are arbitrary choices I've made. This thing says, great. Goes off and makes a TFTP request to worker 3. Says, give me sunwjs2ep. Worker 3 complies. Then it tries to do a boot P. I cannot get this to work at all. It gives up, and it tries to do a boot params request. This is an even more archaic method of doing this. And what this means is the DHCP offer gives it everything back, it loads up the bootloader, immediately forgets all that crap, and tries to go get an IP again and figure out who it should talk to mount an NFS share and get the OS. I have this kind of working. I'm going to give you a side-by-side of this to the best of my ability to show you this startup process. So I'm starting up the Java Station. On the right is a TCP dump of all network traffic associated with this thing's MAC address. The very first two DHCP attempts never generate any traffic that I can monitor. So they always time out. Each one takes a minute. So I'll be back in a second. The second timeout just took place. So very shortly, this thing is going to do a DHCP request, try to find its IP address and its next server. And we're going to see that on the network traffic on the right. It's done that. And this flurry of activity you just saw was the bootloader getting downloaded. Now it's loading it and actually executing the bootloader. It's trying the bootp protocol. My DHCP server has been configured to respond to this, and this thing ignores it, which is ridiculous. And so it's going to give up and do boot params, and we will see a little activity. After bootp failed, those ARPs are the worker 3 VM saying, hey, where did 10.0099 go? Because it's not online anymore as it's loading up the bootloader. Boot params kicks in. This thing does a reverse ARP saying, hey, who am I? The server says, you're 10.0099, and it got it. And now, what should be happening is it should be making what are called boot param requests, RPC calls, over to the server. And you can actually see some activity. It's broadcasting to port 111. But my server ignores it, and this whole thing fails. I've tried a million different things. Following along so far? Back on the command center here, tmux window on worker 3. These are 3 different terminals all on the same machine, worker 3. In the upper right is the network dump I was just showing you. In the upper left is a service called RPC bind. So basically, when this thing's coming in with these requests for boot params, I guess I'll show you that, I've configured the hostname, tower, to point back at me. This is a very minimum config for it to find out where to mount an NFS share from. The traffic never gets to this service. It flows through something called RPC bind, which is deciding, hey, this message coming in from the Java station should go to this boot params thing. I'm not very familiar with all this. This is a very high level explanation. And this RPC bind thing, you can't get this thing to log anything useful. So we got to get real into it. We are going to find its process ID, which is 945706, and then we're going to use strace to give us all the network activity that is showing up, if any, for that process. And so now what I'm going to do is reboot the thing, and we'll come back when it's attempting to do the boot param stuff. Any moment now, it should make its initial DHCP request, and we will see that traffic in the upper right pane. There it goes. It's sent it the bootloader. It's loading the bootloader. We have to wait for bootp to fail. We'll see some reverse ARPs in that upper right pane for the boot params initiation. And then sometimes it does nothing, but most of the time you see this strace for RPC bind trying to take the boot params requests from the Java station and pass them on to the right service, and it's having a lot of trouble. There's the boot param reverse ARP to get an IP, and of course my strace isn't working. But don't worry, I had previously captured what was happening. This thing is receiving a message from the Java station. I'm not all that hot at parsing these, but it seems like it's having trouble deciding what to do with these requests, because it'll just, let me go down a little bit. It just kind of loops over and over again. It's kind of like looking at the matrix. Yeah, I don't know. I'm somewhat positive that the fact that there's so many interfaces on this thing, so we've got, and it's a VM, so, and it has a Docker network, so there's bridging involved. I think it's having trouble deciding, yeah, I should be responding to that thing. So I think what I'm going to do is set this up on a real Linux machine that doesn't have 2 networks going on. This thing's on 2 networks, my home network, my RetroRack network. I think it's causing me some headaches. I have effectively disabled every firewall configuration I can get my hands on on this VM. It's been a fever dream. I've done a bunch of stuff. So I've got a proper host file. Tower is 10.0099. I'm 104, of course. I've got a proper ethers file. This is my DHCP server config. It should just be working. It passes these out initially. I'm telling it to allow boot P, which I think is the default anyway. The boot P, as you saw, just hangs. Everything I've read says, yep, it should just progress at boot P because you've got a DHCP server. That's not the case. That's why I'm trying this boot params thing. One more editor's note here. You'll see my root path has an IP in it. That's not correct. I was trying a million different things. I can assure you I tried just /export JavaStation, and you'll see something like that works later. But at this stage, I couldn't even get the thing to start reaching out over NFS, so the root path is kind of a moot point. I tried a bunch of different things here, and you'll see how it goes. Anyway, I'm going to set this all up again on another machine. I have good news. I was setting up this Linux machine. I've got the TFTP server, I've got the DHCP server, I've got the NetBSD Booterfile on there. Basically the same exact configuration. Powered up the JavaStation, and its boot P request instantly succeeded. And it's trying to open export NFS, which is exactly what I told it. And it failed, of course, because I haven't set up NFS yet on this. So I need to set up the NFS share. I'll put something in there. I want to see what it reaches out for. They're in their totally own world. They're on a 192.168 network. This is .50. This is .68. They are the only two things on the network. Maybe that's helping. I'm not sure. But there is a chance now. Got the NF share exported at export NFS. There's nothing in there. I wanted to see what it would try to grab. It does several of them. netbsd.old.gzip, netbsd.gz, and finally gives up and tries a file called VM-Unix. Now my dream is if I put the JavaOS binary in the export NFS share and rename it to VM-Unix, it might try to grab it and load it with this NetBSD loader. Not holding my breath, but that's what we're going to try first. A copy of JavaOS named VM-Unix is sitting in the export share. If this doesn't work, we'll just get NetBSD and get into single user mode or something. Load some OS. Really hope this does something though. The JavaStation gets its DHCP offer in this network setup like near instantly. And now it's already going over NFS and trying these files. It tries, I don't know, 5 or 6 of them. Didn't get that one. There's VM-Unix. Let's see what happens. It's transferring it. Oh yeah, it's spinning down there. But will it just crash when it tries to load it or get confused? The network logs for NFS are spinning away. As expected. Data access exception. It did not like that file. Okay, let's do NetBSD. Amazingly, on NetBSD's website, there is a 10.1 binary for the Krups from December 2024. People are still really into this, I guess. It's not the file name I wanted. Anyway, I'm going to download this, figure it out. It's booting. It looks like, I don't know what it's doing. It's doing something. It's looking for, it wants a root file system that's on the NFS share. This thing has no hard drives, obviously. And I haven't done any of that. Let's see here. Sure. We're so close. This is going to take a little more work. But I mean, it's doing something. It says preposterous time of day clock time. It's been stuck here for a little bit. I built what I think is a NetBSD file system on my NFS share, following the instructions from that same site, actually, that I mentioned earlier. And it's kind of just stuck. There was a little activity coming through, and then I don't know what it's doing. These are all my exports now, so I've got this full-blown user bin folder in the root NFS, you know, bunch of NetBSD stuff, but I think it's stuck. Well, I tweaked some NFS settings and I didn't get any further. You can see we're awfully close. That kern module path log is like the last one where right before we're supposed to get prompted to press enter, according to this tutorial I'm looking at. And if you look at the network logs, it's trying to reach out and grab like libexec ld.elf_so. So it like tried to get further and then goes offline, I think, because my machine here is confused and saying I can't talk to the Java station anymore. Well, this might be disappointing, but I'm satisfied. As far as I'm concerned, we're running NetBSD. We can't quite get into the prompt, and I think if I messed around with NFS settings for a million more hours, probably could figure it out. But the Java station is doing something, and I don't want to run Linux or NetBSD on it anyway. I want to run JavaOS on it. And the problem is I think that JavaOS version is just so old and arguably meant for the original Mr. Coffee or something. I'm not quite sure on that. But I've got some leads. Sun stopped releasing JavaOS, and they started packaging it up in the server management thing called Netra-J. Sun really liked naming and renaming and coming up with new things. They had a vast ecosystem. Got some leads on getting a Netra-J copy. So I think what we're going to do, let's see if we can't fix this guy up a little bit, get him looking better. I see no reason not to leave that jumper in there. Oh, and a new stick of RAM came. 1 second. I got another RAM stick just for fun. Let's max this baby out at 64 megs of RAM, even though I can't really run anything on it yet. I'm going to boot it up and I'll show you the full NetBSD NFS mount experience on the screen over there. I'm going to power it up. Let's see if we get our full 64 megs of RAM. And I think I was saying it gets its IP much faster in this setup. Yeah, instantly. It's already going off. It already has the bootloader. It's going to try a few names. Mine's called VM Unix, so I'll be back when that kicks off. It's grabbing VM Unix now. I didn't even see if it saw all the RAM. It must, otherwise we wouldn't have gotten this far. This takes, I don't know, a minute. It's like a 3 or 4 megabyte file. I'm exaggerating, it was like 30 seconds. Yeah, it sees all the memory, so we get this screen for a while. I think it's looking at all the hardware. Then it hops into this green screen. I think it does another boot P. Grabs what appears to be the right information. And then we get stuck here. Whoa! Why did we get further this time? Okay, look at this. Well, even better. Did it need more RAM? I changed nothing. All right, now you can't even give me any crap. We're running NetBSD. Oh man, I'm so glad I tried it one more time. Amazing. We succeeded, accidentally. I have no idea what plugging in another stick of RAM did, but you just saw it. It booted over the network. All its file systems are on NFS on this Linux machine here. I'm speechless. We did it. Next step is to get this thing glued back together and not looking like crap. You probably noticed the whole time I've been messing with it, this has remained attached to the metal case, and it's because it doesn't look like it's particularly easy to get out. And a bunch of the tabs holding it in have already broke off, not by me. They were floating around in there making noise before. So we've got one of these little nubs. That was over here. Here's one that's still intact. I'm almost certain if I was to try to pry that, it might already be partially broken, in fact. Yeah, so this part's gonna stay on. And what I want to do is glue this back in and get it somewhat reasonably good looking here. I think it's going to be fine if I can get the glue edge to hold long enough. I'll use super glue for that, just to get this edge attached and in the right position. And then I'm worried that it's not going to be strong enough. In fact, I know it won't be strong enough, just the super glue, because the other part of the case is going to attach into here. I'll show you how that works. But down in there I can see the seam, and it's not touching anything else. And so what I'm going to do is take some of this JB clear weld, never used this stuff before, and I'm going to slather it along the line where I can see it after I super glue it into the right position. That's the thinking here. We got to talk about this and why I ended up breaking this in the first place. So you'll remember This was almost all the way broken from the shipping damage. I'm assuming shipping damage. I'm starting to think maybe someone got in here and took the RAM and just beat the hell out of this thing. I'm not sure. I really don't know. So if you imagine it sitting up, this piece goes here, and the other half of the case connects with that piece. And so I had thought there was sort of a hinge mechanism. That's what it looked like when I was kind of poking my head in there and trying to take the thing apart. And I pried too hard and it broke the rest of this, as you saw on camera. Well, it turns out it looked like a pry mechanism. It's a slide mechanism. And one of these is already broken off. I don't have it, so that already broke off before. Yeah, so you bring the two halves of the case together up and down like that, and then it slides together to lock. That's why this thing needs to be pretty strong. Enough yapping. I have a brand new super glue. Let me get some paper towels. Here in Colorado, things get pressurized, so I'll see if it's gonna blast any of this glue anywhere. Let's see if I can do this without getting it all over the front of the case. That's the tricky part. So you do have a fair amount of time. And again, this is just, why is my hand so shaky? This is just to get this positioned. It's not going to have a lot of strength in this initial go around. My hand is really shaky because I'm like on the bench at a weird angle. It's so funny. It's working though. I'm going to have to wipe some of it out. I think a bunch of it's going to seep out to the front. We might be able to do something about that. Okay, I think that's enough glue. And then I'll try to do this in such a way that it doesn't look like total crap. Let's see if we can pull this off. Uh-oh. 1 second. What is it? Is it IPA that takes super glue away? Nah, this isn't gonna... We're gonna be okay. Just get it all over my hands instead. Okay, I'm gonna hold this for like a bunch of time. I wouldn't say it's my finest work, but it's better than it was. I'll be able to rub some of that excess off. Acetone, I think, will take away super glue, but of course the acetone would probably also really discolor this plastic, so kind of a tough spot. Down in there you can see the crack and some of the super glue. I want to cover that with this JB Weld clear weld stuff. I never used this. It says, whoa, mix it together. Supposedly I can save the rest. Oh, it smells bad. I have 5 minutes or so to accomplish this. And it doesn't need to be very surgical here. I just want some extra strength between the two pieces, and I got some on the metal. I'm trying not to do that in case someone truly wants to take this cover off someday, but I have never used anything like this before. If you were doing it for an extended amount of time, you would want some ventilation. Okay, I think that's it. I wasted a little bit here. I got way more than I need. I don't think I'm going to need this serious stuff for the rest of the project here, so I'm going to get this out of here. Let that cure for at least 5 minutes. A little over 5 minutes later, you can see it stays clear, and it's sort of tacky to the touch still, but I can already tell that was a really good idea. It's super strong. I'm probably going to give that like something like 30 minutes just to be really safe. Check out how dirty this thing was. Ooh. So let's clean up the rest of the parts I haven't glued yet. This piece is in great shape. It doesn't even look very dirty. This is definitely the side you'd have on a shelf. You can't tell the rest of the thing is totally busted up. I got the other half back on. Remember how I said it was this like up and down motion? Not true. You kind of take, this was the good half. This is the side I just fixed. You kind of take it and put it in like this and close it back. Sorry I didn't film it. This thing only has so many times I'm going to be able to get away with that, so that's what it is. This part is unfortunate because I broke the other clip. You can see this clip is in, and then this is loose now. I don't know that I'd ever be able to get like a strong bond on that. I almost like want to 3D print a little sleeve or something just to hold it like that, and that might work nicely. A couple more things to fix. This guy here goes into this peg, and it doesn't want to sit very flush. That I might not bother gluing. I might just slot that in there and call it a day. And then the door goes in like so. And I also don't have a lot of options here. I'm going to put some super glue there. Maybe I'll super glue right here to this other piece. And that'll have to be good enough. I'm going to do that. The final result, the New Haven Unified School District Java Station is back in action. This was the broken side. Look at that. These close really well. So this is all glued back together. It's still a little loose. And these actually hold this together quite nicely. They kind of snap together a little bit. So I'm happy about that. This crack repair, not my finest work. This white stuff is dried super glue. I believe I will be able to clean that off a little bit, maybe even just soap and water. Let me know what you think. I didn't bother gluing this at all. I did, however, glue this piece to this one, and that's working out fine. And overall, I mean, given how we started, I think it's in really good shape. I'm really glad I have this whole section here, this whole side with the Java Station, the cup logo, the Java and the coffee cup logo, all just looking really good. Very cool looking machine, just so 90s. So here's the full experience with all the cables corralled in these little doors. Pretty slick. I was bitching earlier when I couldn't quite get things working, but the moment I moved over to this tiny little Linux machine in a local network, kind of growing on me, kind of like them. Pretty cool machine. It's also worth noting, you can see it's cannot create dev null, permission denied. We are booted into NetBSD for sure, and we are using the file system, but I clearly have some permissions issues on my various NFS shares that are required for this to work, so a little bit of homework to do here if I ever wanted to, really properly use this thing. So that's the Java Station 2, aka Krups, aka the tower. I like it. This will be back. I really want to get JavaOS running on this thing. That was the whole point of this video. Kind of always knew it would be a long shot, especially since Sun only ever released publicly, without paying that very old version that I have that's obviously not working on this guy. So we'll be back with NetraJ. This video got really long. I hope it made sense. It's not too complicated, but the debugging process was a little involved. So hopefully I got everything I was trying and doing across. As always, thanks again for watching. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing. Just past 70,000 subscribers. The next goal is 100,000. Of course, if you'd really like to support the channel, I'm on Patreon. I post behind-the-scenes type videos, the occasional early release, and you get access to the Serial Port Discord. I really hope you enjoyed this. We succeeded. More videos on the way. I'll catch you in the next one.